No, there's actually nothing wrong with this video. It's actually, you either have cataracts or you're drunk. But how did I know that? So, I'm trying to talk quietly here just because it always turns out loud, so. And I've been smoking too much and have enough sleep, so that embarrassing crack of my voice. So, Michael Rory Maxwell asks on my video, to all creationist equals Judaizer, what's your opinion on most of the fathers viewing creation narrative, the creation narrative as literal, viewing the creation narrative as literal? To me, it doesn't matter much, but I know that that opinion irks the ire of Orthodox fundies. Well, again, that's a contradiction of fundamentalist Orthodox, because we don't have fundamentalism in our church. When I'm talking about the creationists, I'm not talking about somebody who says, I just think it happened this way, or the development of the universe because it, or even the planet, or whatever you want to call creation. As long as you say God did it somehow, you're fine, you're in the clear, because you're not stepping on the toes of the councils of the creeds. What I'm concerned about is when those people, like Kent Hovind or any of these people, bind creation, bind their version of the creation narrative with salvation, with Christ, with being a Christian. Like, if you don't accept their version of the creation narrative, or their interpretation, let me say, of the creation narrative, of which the creation narrative is a bad term to use because we have blatantly two. I don't know if you can see that. Two. Yeah, you can see that. Two creation narratives. And last time I counted, when I was going through documentary hypothesis, I found 4. And that's not even trying to count stuff in the New Testament. That's just in Genesis alone. It's not going through the other stuff and counting just some of the stuff that gets talked about throughout the Old Testament, and then into the New of what's going on with this, So as long as you say God created the world ex nihilo, it doesn't matter. None of the church fathers were binding their interpretations. And I see this as worse than the Judaizers, because the Judaizers at least were taking accepted, practiced Judaism, not of their own interpretation. And then they were adding that to the message of Christ. So this is a hyper-personal, I almost want to say shirk. I don't know if it would be idolatry, but it would be putting yourself on the level with God. It would be something worse than idolatry, of saying, I too add to the gospel. Now you're adding to the gospel. And again, how people remain in sola scriptura and will blindly will blind themselves to obvious things where, if you're viewing the New Testament as one book, which it's not, and you say, well, nobody can add or take away. My alarm went off. Nobody can add or take away. Well, when you're adding, that's a bad thing. And again, even to the Orthodox, you can't add to Christianity, nor can you take away from it. It ceases to be. There's some essential things, and there's some vital things. They're all essential, but there's some extremely vital things. Like, there can be differences among parishes in certain traditions, or even differences among patriarchal traditions. But you can't, let's say, reject Constantinople, or Ephesus, or any of the 7. There is actually one church that no other form of Christianity in any shape not Jehovah's Witness, not Oneness Pentecostal, not the Roman Catholic Church, not any form of Protestantism will even recognize as Christian because of its version of the creation story. And if it were only for this, it would be knocked out of Christianity altogether. But they keep piling on the adding to Christianity and taking away from it and changing it to where no one in the right mind can call it Christian anymore, and it's even debated among themselves whether they actually are Christians, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, known as the Mormons. They don't believe God created the universe. They believe there's infinite amounts of gods, and that the God Elohim, who was the Father who was once born a man, flesh and bone, just assembled the earth from existing matter, which right there, that would take it straight out of Christianity. At least the Gnostics would attribute the demiurge to things like that and say, well, no, from, they could go back and talk about the light and the Pleroma and Abraxas and Sophia and the Logos, and to these descending from this, what they call light, from this till you get to a demiurge that would be either so evil or so ignorant as to create a material world. So the good God would predate the demiurge and would therefore predate the universe and be outside of the universe in time. And the demiurge might be as well. Some looked at it as a just God not capable of mercy, and some of them looked at it as a wicked God. There's nothing good about it. It's not even just. It's just malevolent. It's mesotheistic. It's a hateful thing. That will never be on your side. Not even to render justice. Which, if you take the first explanation the first view of the Gnostics that I gave you, and you say, well, there's a God that's completely just, and then there's a God that's completely merciful, you'd have to do some. Yaroslav Pelikan, he was Protestant when he wrote his critique of the history of the church. And when he got to Martin Luther, he said, well, Martin Luther would be a Marcionite, but and I wonder, and David Witham had brought this up, I wonder if he wrote that now, if he would strain so hard to say that Luther wasn't a Marcionite. Because of all intents and purposes, not intensive purposes, intents and purposes, how are the Calvinists not Valentinians, and how are the Lutherans not Marcionites? It's effectively antinomianism. That's what that's what Marcion was famous for, his innovation. So if there's no binding, and the Church Fathers definitely did not do that, they didn't bind a literal view of it. We see later on people interpreting, and even the Church Fathers interpreting through a Platonic lens. And certainly the Roman Catholic Church was using more of a Platonic model that supplemented by, or let's say they had the narrative of creation, but it was seen through the lens of Neoplatonism or Platonism. Now, not all Church Fathers did that, and of course, not all Roman Catholics viewed it as this. Not even what they call the doctors. Not all of them did this. But the Catholic Church had come out in 1929 and said, we're going to suspend all judgment of evolution. We're going to have a look into this to see which side is it. Is it Darwinian evolution, or is it this weird form of taking the Bible literally, which they would have never gone the latter, but they were just inspecting. Darwinism is this, how are we to respond to this? And at the same time, they also say, how are we to respond to the Kami Yohanian? They said that's open for dispute, which was how the church should act. I'm not in agreement with the Catholic Church, obviously, but I have to give them credit for that. And I believe it was 1990, either 92, 94, or 96, that John Paul II came out and said evolution is, can we no longer talk about it as a theory or a hypothesis. It's the best explanation for biological life's evolution of how we got here. But that doesn't address biogenesis or doesn't trample on God creating the world ex nihilo, which pretty much we use Lemaitre's model of that Hoyle called Big Bang, which shows the universe created ex nihilo, from nothing. Because each time they try to reduce the mass of the primordial atom, they keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I think first it was like the size of planet Earth, then the size of a basketball, then the size of a golf ball, then the size of a pinhead, then the size of an atom, and you call it the super atom. And it's a regression back to ad absurdum, because once you get to something the size of the Earth, it's already way too compact for not even the laws of physics to work, and they admit that you can't get back to the Big Bang without physics breaking down on you, all the laws of thermodynamics just going out the window. So, fine. But the Church Fathers never bound a creation narrative to Christ or salvation or being part of the church. It was you could be a martyr for Christ and know Christ and not have been even able to read. I mean, what about all those who were pagan and accepted that we see in the apostles, this Kent Hovind and these creationists seriously think that Paul or Barnabas or Silas or Peter or John actually sat down and said, well, let me explain to you the first 6,000 years of creation, and then I can tell you about Christ. No. That's just beyond silliness. So I hope this answers it for you, and I hope this is a sufficient answer. And again, there's nothing wrong with my camera. It's you're either drunk or have cataracts. Take it easy. Peace to you. May God's service here in Ireland.